One night is all I ask. The words were not spoken aloud, but they echoed in the cavernous silence of Count Alaric of Blackwood's study, a phantom bargain with a merciless fate. He stood before a window, the rain-slicked glass reflecting a man he scarcely recognized. A ghost haunting his own life, his face a cartography of old wars, bisected by a scar that pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent, cynical sneer. The king's decree had been delivered that morning, a silken scroll tied with a golden ribbon, its message a velvet-wrapped executioner's axe. Marry by the season's end, or the Blackwood title and its vast, untamed lands would be forfeit. The crown needed his bloodline secured, his loyalty tethered by a bride. He, the infamous Wolf Count, who had retreated from the world's gilded cruelty, was to be paraded back into the marriage market like a prize stallion. A bitter laugh escaped him, a harsh, grating sound. He despised the simpering, ambitious debutantes of the court, their worth measured in dowries and their hearts in carats. He would not chain himself to such a hollow creature. One night is all I ask. Alara traced the words in the frost blooming on the cottage's single windowpane, a prayer whispered to the encroaching dusk. Outside, the wind howled a lament for the dying day. Inside, the hearth was a tomb of cold ash. Since her father's passing, the chill had seeped into the very bones of their small home, a constant reminder of the hunger that gnawed at the bellies of her younger siblings, asleep now under a threadbare blanket. Her hands, calloused and stained with dye from the loom that was both her torment and her only hope, ached with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle. The intricate patterns she wove, once a source of pride, were now a frantic race against destitution. Each snapped thread felt like a personal failure. She was strong, she was resilient, but she was so terribly tired of being strong. Then, pinned to the village post that afternoon, she had seen it. A notice penned in an elegant script. An anonymous, high-born patron sought a discreet female companion for an elderly, reclusive relation. The duties were simple, reading, quiet company. The remuneration was a sum so staggering it made her heart stop. It was enough to buy firewood for a decade, to fill the larder until it overflowed, to ensure her brother and sister would never know the fear she felt now. It was a lifeline. It was a trap. It was an answer. Blackwood Keep rose from the mist-shrouded hills like a jagged black tooth, a fortress built to repel the world. Alara, clutching her small bundle of belongings, felt her courage falter. The steward, a man whose face seemed carved from granite, met her at the gate. His instructions were cold and precise. She was to attend to the master's uncle, a man of quiet, often difficult temperament. She was to speak only when spoken to ask no personal questions, and above all, to remain unobtrusive. Her charge, she was told, preferred the shadows. Her charge, it turned out, was a man who looked more like a groundskeeper than a nobleman's relation. He was dressed in simple, worn woolens, and when he first met her gaze, his eyes, a startling wintry gray, were devoid of warmth. This was Alaric, though he offered no name at first. He was the man from the window, the Count himself, playing the first move in his desperate, cynical game. He would pose as a poor, dependent kinsman, a forgotten fixture of the keep. He would watch her, test her, wait for the inevitable slip, the greed, the ambition, the prying curiosity he expected from all women. "The master values his privacy," he stated, his voice a low rumble, "and his possessions. Be mindful of your station." His first test was a simple one. He left a silver locket, intricately chased with the image of a wolf, on a bench in the walled garden where she was instructed to walk. He watched from a high window as she discovered it. He saw her fingers, so practical and deft, trace the cool metal. He braced himself for her to secret it away. Instead, she took it directly to the granite-faced steward, her expression one of simple, honest concern. "I believe this was lost," she said, her voice clear and calm. "It looks to be of great value." Alaric felt an unfamiliar sensation stir within him, a flicker of something that was not suspicion. When the steward later reported her action, Alaric merely grunted, but his gaze kept returning to the memory of her hands. Not the delicate, pale hands of a lady, but the working hands of a woman who understood value beyond silver and gold. He was assigned to her, or rather, he assigned himself to her, under the guise of showing her the duties required by his uncle. Their first shared task was the restoration of a long-neglected greenhouse. The glass was clouded with grime, the air thick with the scent of decay. It had once been his mother's sanctuary, and he had let it fall to ruin along with his heart. He expected complaints, sighs of aristocratic boredom. Alara, however, simply tied back her hair, rolled up her sleeves, and set to work with a quiet, focused energy that shamed his own inertia. As they worked, a sudden violent storm broke over the keep, the sky turning a bruised purple. Rain lashed against the glass panes, and a deafening clap of thunder shook the very foundations of the structure. The sound, so like the cannon fire that still echoed in his nightmares, sent a tremor through Alaric's body. His breath hitched. The walls of the greenhouse seemed to close in, the air thick and suffocating. He was no longer in a garden. He was back on a muddy, blood-soaked field, the screams of men dying around him. He felt a small, warm hand on his arm. He flinched, his muscles coiling. But the touch was not demanding. It was steady, grounding. Alara stood beside him, her face etched not with fear of the storm or of his sudden, terrifying stillness, but with a profound, knowing compassion. She said nothing. She did not ask what was wrong. Instead, she began to hum, a low, simple melody he recognized from the village folk songs. It was a tune about planting seeds and waiting for the sun. The sound cut through the chaos in his mind, an anchor in the swirling tempest of his memory. Slowly, the battlefield receded, replaced by the scent of damp earth and the steady rhythm of her humming. His breathing evened. The tension bled from his shoulders. For the first time in years, someone had seen his wound not with pity or revulsion, but with a quiet, healing grace. "Thank you," he managed to say, the words feeling foreign and inadequate on his tongue. "The storm will pass," she replied softly, her hand still on his arm. That night, something in him shifted irrevocably. This was not a test anymore. This was a torment of his own making. He had sought to expose a woman's falsehood and had instead been confronted with a truth so pure it burned him. He found himself revealing a small piece of that truth to her. "My name is Alaric," he told her as they tidied their tools. He did not offer the title, just the name. A name he had not felt was his own for a very long time. It was the first crack in the armor he had so carefully constructed. In the days that followed, the greenhouse became their world. Under her patient care, life began to return to the neglected corners. Shoots of green pushed through the dark soil. Alaric found himself talking, truly talking, for the first time in a decade. He spoke of the plants, their Latin names a shield for the deeper things he could not say. She, in turn, spoke of her home, her siblings, the way the light fell across her loom in the morning. He learned the names of her brother and sister Leo and May. He saw the worry that clouded her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. The deception became a constant, heavy weight upon his soul. He was falling for the woman he was supposed to be judging. He began to leave anonymous gifts at her family's cottage, a cart of firewood delivered in the dead of night, a basket of food from the keep's kitchens, a bolt of warm wool. He told Alara it was the Count's charity, a whim of the reclusive master. She accepted the gifts with gratitude, but he saw in her eyes that it was not the anonymous charity that eased her spirit. It was their shared hours, the quiet understanding that grew between them like the tenacious vines in the greenhouse. She was beginning to care for Alaric, the scarred, somber man, not the faceless, wealthy Count. And that knowledge was both his greatest joy and his deepest shame. The midpoint of his cruel charade arrived with the clatter of carriage wheels on the cobblestones. Lady Beatrice d'Aubigny, a diamond of the first water and the king's not-so-subtle suggestion for his bride, descended upon Blackwood Keep with an entourage and an air of supreme confidence. She was everything he loathed, exquisitely beautiful, impeccably dressed, and possessing a soul made of polished ice. She found them in the garden, where Alaric was showing Alara how to prune the roses. Seeing the Count in his rough-spun clothes, his hands stained with dirt, conversing with a woman who was clearly a servant, Beatrice's lip curled in disdain. "You there?" she called to Alara, her voice sharp and imperious. "Girl, fetch me a glass of cooled water. My throat is parched from the journey." Alara, startled, began to curtsy, but Alaric moved, placing himself squarely between the two women. His posture shifted, the unassuming groundskeeper vanishing, replaced by the latent authority of the Lord of the Keep. "She is with me," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Beatrice laughed, a brittle, unpleasant sound. "With you? Don't be absurd. She's a commoner. Have her attend to her duties." "Her duty?" Alaric bit out, his wintry eyes flashing with a cold fire Beatrice had never seen. "Is to be here, in this garden. You, madam, are the one who is trespassing." He turned to Alara, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Alara, please, continue with the roses. I will deal with our guest." The dismissal was absolute, a slap delivered with icy precision. Lady Beatrice stood frozen, her face a mask of fury and humiliation, as Alaric escorted her back toward the keep, his back ramrod straight. Alara watched them go, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had seen more than a man defending a servant. She had seen a lion defending his territory. The power he had displayed was staggering and utterly confusing. Who was this man, this Alaric? Who could dismiss a high-born lady with such finality? The question lingered, a seed of unease planted in the fertile ground of her growing affection. That evening, the air in the keep was thick with unspoken things. He sought her out, finding her staring into the flames of a great hearth in the library, a room she was not supposed to be in. He didn't care. The rules of his own game no longer mattered. "I am not accustomed to company," he began, standing a few feet away. "She is very beautiful," Alara said, her gaze fixed on the fire. "Beauty is not the same as warmth," he countered, stepping closer. He looked at the flames, at the way they danced and cast flickering shadows on her face. "For years, I believed all human connection was a transaction, a bargain for land, for power, for advantage. I built walls to keep that world out." He finally looked at her, his soul raw and exposed in his gaze. "I never imagined someone might simply walk through them." He lifted a hand, his fingers hesitating before they traced the line of her jaw. He thought of his scar, the ugly mark of his past. As if reading his mind, Alara raised her own hand. Her calloused fingertips, so full of life and work, gently, reverently, touched the jagged scar on his cheek. There was no hesitation, no revulsion, only acceptance. It was an absolution he had not known he was desperate for. The last of his defenses crumbled to dust. He leaned in, closing the distance between them, and his lips met hers. It was not a kiss of passion, but of profound, aching need. It was tender and desperate, a confession and a prayer, a moment of perfect, devastating truth built upon a foundation of lies. The dramatic irony was a knife twisting in his gut. He had found the one genuine soul in the world, and he was about to destroy her. The next morning, the illusion shattered. Alaric was crossing the great hall, his mind a whirlwind of hope and guilt, planning how he could possibly tell her the truth, when the steward intercepted him. The man, flustered by the lingering presence of Lady Beatrice and her retinue, bowed low. "My Lord Count," the steward said, his voice carrying clearly in the stone-walled space. "Lady Beatrice requests an audience before she departs. She is insistent." Alaric froze. He turned slowly, his blood turning to ice. Alara was standing not 10 feet away, a basket of linens in her arms. The basket slipped from her grasp, its contents spilling across the flagstones in a pool of white. Her face was a canvas of shock, which bled rapidly into dawning horror, and then into a glacial, soul-shearing betrayal. "My lord, Count," she whispered, the title a venomous dart on her tongue. Every shared moment, Every quiet conversation, every gentle touch, replayed in her mind, now twisted and grotesque. The poor relation, the master's charity, the defense in the garden. It was all a lie, a performance. She was not a companion. She was a specimen under a microscope, a mouse in a nobleman's cruel maze. He had not been sharing his vulnerability. He had been gauging her reaction. His name was a choked sound in his throat. Elara! She straightened her back, her inner dignity a shield against the agony. A bitter, heartbreaking smile touched her lips. "Tell me, my lord," she said, her voice dripping with an ice that could have frozen the fires of hell. "Was I a good enough actress for your little play? Did I pass your test?" She did not wait for an answer. She turned, her back rigid, and walked out of the great hall, out of the keep, and out of his life, leaving him standing amidst the ruins of his own creation. The silence that descended upon Blackwood Keep was heavier and more profound than any that had come before. The castle, once a refuge, was now Alaric's prison, each stone a monument to his folly. He sent Lady Beatrice away with a dismissal so cold it would be spoken of in court for years, but the victory was hollow. He had won his solitude back, but now it was an agony. He had set a test to find a woman immune to the lure of a title, and in his arrogance, had become the very thing he despised. A man who used power and deception to manipulate a human heart. Her heart, the only one he had ever truly wanted. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the window. The scar was no longer a mark of war, but the brand of a coward. Elara returned to her cottage, the chill of the keep's stone still clinging to her. Humiliation was a fire in her veins, but beneath it, her spirit, though battered, was not broken. She had been kind. She had been compassionate. She had offered her heart honestly. The fault was not in her goodness, but in his deceit. She would not be his victim. She went to her loom, her hands finding the familiar rhythm of the shuttle and thread. She poured her grief, her rage, and her shattered love into the patterns, weaving threads of midnight blue and sorrowful gray alongside defiant streaks of silver and gold. She would weave her way back to herself. A week later, a commotion arose in the village square. Count Alaric of Blackwood was there. He had not come in a grand carriage, but on a single black charger, dressed not in silks and velvets, but in the simple dark woolens of the man she had known in the garden. He did not come to her cottage. Instead, he approached the village elder, his voice carrying for all to hear. He spoke of the need for new tapestries for the keep's great hall, works that would tell the story of the land and its people. And he publicly, formally commissioned the work. He named the artisan he sought, Elara, daughter of a weaver, whose skill was, he declared, unmatched in the entire duchy. He offered a contract, not a handout, a contract that recognized her as a master of her craft, with a payment that would ensure her family's prosperity for generations. It was not charity. It was respect, a public validation of her worth, entirely separate from him. Then, and only then, did he walk to her cottage. He stood before her, his face stripped of all artifice, his wintry eyes filled with a desperate, self-loathing honesty. "I did not come to make excuses," he said, his voice raw. "They are worthless. I came to tell you the truth." He told her everything. The king's ultimatum, his bitter cynicism, his fear of being trapped in a loveless political union. The test, it was never for you, Elara. It was for me, a desperate gamble to prove my own bleak view of the world right. And I failed. You were true, and I was the fraud. He took a breath, the words tearing from him. I lied about who I was. But what I feel for you, it is the only truth I have left. He looked into her eyes, holding nothing back. "One night," he said, his voice cracking on the memory of his own arrogant bargain. "I thought one night of your time was all I would need to judge you, a test of your character. Now I ask for a lifetime to earn your forgiveness. Not as your count, as Alaric." Elara looked at the man before her. The pain was still there, a sharp shard in her heart. But looking into his eyes, she saw not the wolf count, But the man who had trembled at the sound of thunder, the man who had learned the names of her siblings, the man who had found solace in a forgotten garden. She saw his transformation paid for with his own despair. This was not a bargain. It was a plea. Slowly, she nodded. Their return to Blackwood Keep was not a tale of a commoner who captured a count. It was the story of two equals, a partnership forged in fire and truth. She was not merely the Countess. She was Master Weaver Ilara of Blackwood, her studio established in the brightest, sunniest tower of the keep. The greenhouse thrived, bursting with life. The great hearths were never cold. Over the years, the tapestries she wove filled the great hall, their threads telling a story not of battles and crests, but of a garden, a storm and two hands, one scarred, one calloused, finding each other in the dark. Their love was their quiet, earned triumph, a testament to the fact that the most profound connections are not bargained for, but built.